Hey everybody, welcome back to another Coalition deep dive, but as always, we're gonna do the daily Wargamers, or the last 2 days of Wargamers. Last 3 days, today's Saturday. I've done Tuesday, Wednesday, hold on, when did I record my last video? No, it wasn't Tuesday, so okay, Wednesday onwards, we got quite a few to get through. I remember getting the ILTA CP in like second guess, okay. Smaller than small. No, bigger than small, excuse me. More than 5 HP. Faster than 110. Oh, this might be a plane or a helicopter. Better than medium optics makes me think it's a plane. Because they tend to have, in optics, air detection. Very good. In fact, there's nothing lower than good, if I'm not mistaken. Category, Mech motor air armored support. It could be a marine plane. If it was a quote-unquote normal plane, it would definitely light up as yellow, as those planes are available in every spec. So let's try a marine plane, I think. Relatively cheap, if it is indeed a plane. Autonomy less than 700 also makes sense. Everything here, to my mind, makes sense. Only a maximum of exactly 2 weapons. Yeah, 2 weapons. Relatively old, relatively cheap. Marines like a Su-7. I think some of those are Marines. If I could also go safer for like a Su-22, but they might be a bit too new for Eastern Bloc. I think BKL is the napalm. I think that's the napalm. It is not a plane, so it's a helicopter, I presume. Recon helicopter, probably. Go for like an Mi-8R. 2 weapons. 2 weapons Recon helicopter. With... Hold on, what? Oh, no. Oh, right. It could be less than medium. I'm so stupid. It's a big helicopter. It has poor optics and poor stealth. 8 HP. Autonomy, okay, whatever. 8 HP. It's not a Hind. 8 HP, 2 weapons. 8 HP. Big. Well, it can't be a Tiger because those have medium optics and stealth. Plus, they have more than 2 weapons. There's not a lot of 8 HP helicopters with like 2 weapons. Oh, unless it's just like an Mi-8 MTV or something. It is a rocket pod. Oh, nice! And now it tells you if you're... Oh, I think that's also somewhat new. I don't remember this being the case. NSVT is correct, so it's like an Mi-8T. It's 30 to 40. No, I think it's a TV then. I think the Mi-8T is only 25. Could be the... No, it can't be the K29 TV. It has to be the TV, I think. Yeah, because the Mi-8T is 20 points. 25, sorry, in which case this wouldn't be yellow. Okay, okay. Yeah, it's a good one. 24, let's go. Mi-8 TV. It's not a helicopter, it's 30 points. 30 points. Slower, okay. A maximum of 2 weapons. Poor stealth and optics. Probably some kind of vehicle at 30 points. Let's go for a tank. Medium could be like a Leopard. 182. I think that might be 30 points. Ooh. Given that, okay, the fact that it's not a Leopard is interesting because apparently everything else is correct. Could be like a... Is there anything on Leopard chassis except for a Gepard? Because like speed and autonomy being the same. OF40 could be the OF4. No, it's not Italy. I was at first thinking if it's the OF40, maybe the gun has a different designation, you know? The exact same speed at 30 points, also not a tank. It could still be a Recon tank, mind you. Or I guess in a vehicle tab. Oh, that is interesting. Maybe like are the VTS1? No, that's 25 points in it. 30 points not in the tank tab. 65 points also means it's basically no Recon tank. Because most of them are slower There's a Reckoning, but that's also 65 points. Like it's like you got T55s and all that at 30 points. I don't think it's a Recon vehicle. Unless no, of course it's not stealth and optics, what am I thinking? It'd be like an IFV or no IFV? I think most IFVs at like 30 points do have medium optics, I reckon. BMP 2 IFV maybe. Go for like the OBR 1986. Does have 2 weapons. Does it have medium optics? Oh, we're so in it. It's this thing, right? Yeah. Damn, I'm good, dude. I'm so good at this game. Alright, PvP. 10 HP. 4 optic stealth. It is an 80 GM with but no autocannon. No autocannon, but does have an 80 GM. And more expensive. Alright, it's in a vehicle type. So what? It could be like I don't think it can be the ASLEV 202 because that thing has an MG. It's also at least 40 points, so it can't really be an IFV. An expensive-ish 80 GM carrier with a weapon on top of its 80 GM in the vehicle type. And at first, my mind went to the M1992 that North Korea has in its Recon tab, because it also carries a grenade launcher. You know, most 80 GM carriers only have their 80 GM. What else is there? If it's not an IFV. I don't think there's an IFV except for like the Merkava that costs more than 40 points anyway. Even the Bradley, right, was what, 35? So it can't be a transport. A weapon on top of the 80 GM. Now I'm kinda stumped. AMX 10P, but it's too cheap. RAM, too cheap. It's probably like an MG or something, right? What else would they carry? But it's also relatively expensive. Usually you expect that from like these low tier vehicles, again like the AMX 10P. It's probably big, right? Surely if it's small, it would be like a Jeep, in which case it wouldn't carry another weapon. Also reasonably fast. And has good autonomy even. Not that new though. Can't be the Puree or Hafiz. It is also in mech and armored, so it is tracked. Damn, what is this? Yugoslavia has a Polo. There's no like. Wow, I'm really stunned. South Africa, no. China has some expensive carriers, but I don't think the ZDF has NMG. Finland has the XAs. I gotta throw something out there, right? Let's go for like the ASLEV 202. Yeah, see, it also has M240. In Commonwealth, though. It's Canadian or British. The Tuas. Wait, no, I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb. It only has one weapon. I'm so stupid. Right? It doesn't tell me. It only tells me that this weapon is incorrect. It also just been not the. Oh my god! I'm so mad. I am so mad at being too dumb. It's probably like this thing here. It's probably like this thing here. Yep. Oh my god. I'm fucking UI blind. It was just embarrassing. It's got it in 4, which isn't bad, but just UI blind. Or illiterate or whatever. Either way. Back to the good stuff. Is that a curse word? I think it is, right? Either way. Finland. I don't think we went over Finland, did we? Logistics, there's nothing really extraordinary in here. What is kind of extraordinary is that the fact that the CV infantry gets access to the KT, like a proper, like a BTR 80 WC551 type of deal. Not like you ever use it, because you want both of these cards in, at least one in the infantry tab. Most of the time you run both of them in there. It's ridiculously good. Other than that, the gas, what's worth pointing out is the fact that its autonomy is horrible. For GPC that is, it still mostly doesn't matter, admittedly, right? But 320 isn't that much, and on some maps, if you have to relocate your CV sometimes to put it safe, and just be stranded out in between zones doing nothing. Yeah, DDR50 is also very slow. I wouldn't recommend it. BP1 is okay. XA is only 1 ammo all around, but fast at least. Yeah, none of these are like amazing in one way or another, right? They're all just mediocre. Tech CVs are fine. T55 is okay, and the T72 is decent. The bullpup T72, where the third is too far back for some reason. MI4 exists, and yeah, 2 small supply drunks and the supply helo. But really, honestly, the only noteworthy thing about this whole tab is just the KT. And then this thing, it just never comes into play because you always want the KT on other stuff. Yeah, and the fact, I guess, that you have a bullpup T72, which just looks funny. But yeah, no, nothing worth like special about this tab at all, other than that. Okay, Edo 78. There's only one reason to really ever use those. It's if you want to cut your KTs as cheap as possible, because then you get it with 5-point infantry, or I guess any of the other XAs with weapons, I suppose, right? I mean, given the fact that they're not in mech, I think this never comes into play. Because it's a very niche scenario, and essentially what you're doing is you're transforming one of your infantry tab slots into a vehicle tab slot in a way. Because basically, what you do is you use just a vehicle if you buy them with the I-78, which is almost a worthless unit. Which is why it costs 5 points, which is almost nothing in this game. Yeah, no, that's the only reason. I've seen it done once or twice. I wouldn't recommend it unless maybe you want to try some meme strategies or something, or you just want to like screw around, which is fair enough. It's not like it's bad, right? You're paying 25 points for a better LAV, essentially. An LAV at 25 points is fine, right? The Recon, I guess the vehicle type LAV is 20 points. You paid 5 points more for the better Bushmaster, which is a significant upgrade, quite a significant upgrade. And I guess you get a manpad that occasionally might damage something if you're very lucky, or can even can be medium optics for you. It's not entirely worthless. Don't get me wrong, right? Or with the Musti or the KRKK, if you want like a 20-point grenade launcher that does nothing else, or a 25-point BMP2. Again, the cards themselves wouldn't be inherently bad. It's just that the infantry slots are so valuable that I would never recommend this. And I brought up mech because in mech it's the only spec where you have 9 slots. So in mech, you could consider it, right? Sacrificing one of the slots like that, but they're not available in mech. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. But and at the same time, while I wouldn't recommend it, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Now, what I definitely would say is bad is using them in anything that isn't like a decent vehicle on its own, right? In which case you're wasting a slot. Idle 87, Idle 86, sorry. Igla Squad is good. It's just why ever use it when you have air coins? Maybe in Finland mech or armored, where you don't get the air coins. But then in Baltic you should run the Grom, right? Yeah. So yeah, if you're playing pure Finland and you don't have access to the Erikois, that's the only scenario where I would ever really recommend using those, honestly. And those are mech and armored, namely. And in Moto, you have 7 slots, but you don't want this in your infantry tab either way. Yakari 90. There's really one reason to use Yakari, and that's if you want to increase availability for spam. If you run the KT, you have reduced availability, so there's no reason to run base ones. Yeah. But the 90s are just straight up an upgrade, right? In some other, for some other infantry squads, technically the 90s variants, if they cost the same, might be a slight downgrade if they have a different primary weapon or something like that, right? But in this case, it's just straight up an upgrade. Same MG, same primary weapon, and the better law, right? Which just has more accuracy and more AP. What more do you want? Yeah, very common to see this card, right? Because it's cheap KT. The squad itself is still fine, like more than solid for 10 points, right? They have a solid MG. Assault rifle is fine, and the law is pretty okay for 10 points. In fact, the A4 law is pretty good for 10 points. And still an above average MG, which is also worth pointing out. They have pretty solid 4-line infantry DPS. Do not ignore that. So this is why, running them in a BT50, still very, very solid. Not just because it's a cheap spam for meat shield with the 2 front armor and 50 cal, even though it's slow. The squad itself is still, it's not quite Dragona level, right? But it's certainly better than Razzmann level. Yakari, you used to see them every now and then. Nowadays, not so much. In Moto, they were pretty solid, or like picked sometimes for town grinding. Their big thing is that their primary weapon is actually an amalgamation of a elite SMG and a shock SMG. If you look at this or compare this to any other SMG on shock squads, which I don't think there are any in this deck, but we can compare this to elite squads. Shock squads should have, I think, 350. Is it 355? I don't remember what it is. Either way, this is just the ammo consumption. This weapon is just all messed up. If we compare these, I give Karatin and then let's say Wargamer, also a shock SMG, right? Look at the rate of fire, right? You get 53.33 versus 34.29. Same accuracy, by the way. So they don't get elite accuracy, but then, right, Eriko is also 53. So basically, they get crazy accuracy boost, which makes them combined with 15 men at 25 points. Very strong for town grinding, where SMGs are just very good. MG, the RPT also got buffed, so it's a better MG now. Yeah, they're incredibly strong for town grinding. And that was the main usage. You don't see them that often anymore these days. People just run more cards of the special forces. There's still a solid squad for that role, which is why you mainly saw it in Moto, because you have the extra 2 slots, so you can afford to run that there. And of course, with the while Moto, with elite, like them coming on elite base, does have strong town grinding capabilities. They were even stronger, right? Very card efficient, very cost efficient. Yeah. And since you lose Panzeri in Moto, you actually have quite a few slots more than you might think for like your average Moto deck. Nostovaki, they're a meme. I try them every now and a couple of times, but they could probably be 5 points and still be useless. Very weak against infantry, very weak against vehicles. Yeah, and being 5 HP, you can't really use them as meat shields. Yeah, don't bother with them. Panzer Yakari, they're actually an okay shock squad for 20 points. They mainly lack range on their AT weapon, but they have a good MG. They have decent AP for 20 points. Like, it's a Carl Gustav with less range, right? They have some solid transport options: BMP1, BMP2, KT. It's worth pointing out that this BMP2 has the late 2A42, I think. Now does it only have 30% the late variant? I thought it had more. Yeah, no, it does have the late autocannon, late 2A42, which means that 30 instead of 25% accuracy and another step of range. The earlier variant, for example, on the East German BMP2, has 1 step less range. So it's a late variant of the BMP2. But yeah, honestly, for 5 points more, you get Apilas, right? Again, just a straight upgrade. In this case, you have to pay 5 points for the straight upgrade. Also, assault rifle with a retractable stock, which is why they got stabilizer and CQC bonuses. It's minor, but it's worth pointing out. For 5 points more, especially 20 to 25, as opposed to 10, 15. Apilas upgrade is just so worth it. Still the same transport options. Very early in the game, or, well, you always saw them in the KT. Nowadays, you don't see that very often. Nowadays, it's just even the XA180, and sometimes you don't see them at all, even when you have access to them. People started to use these guys a lot more. They were not really used that much early on, outside of Moto, but even in the unspec, you don't see Panzeri that often these days. But then again, you just don't see unspec Finland or Baltic as much as you see it with Moto. But honestly, all the transport options are fine. I guess the XA doesn't see that much use anymore since the PB is now at 10 points. But you still see it because in Moto you only get 3 of them, right? And you only get real transport options in Moto, but all of the transport options are fine. You want them cheap, or like very cheap, or as cheap as possible, I suppose, or cheap but in a somewhat capable transport, in a quite capable and survivable transport, in a strong like wheel transport, or in cheap wheel transport. All of the options are fine. Same for Panzeri, but again, they don't really see much play. Maybe in Finland mech, there's a reason to play them, because you only get 2 cars of these, but maybe Baltic mech as well. Other than that, base Panzeri are just overshadowed. It's not like they're horrible, it's just they're not really good enough to bring them on top of the 90s variants, right? If they had like a crazy good MG or primary like the Tartiniakari, there would be a reason for them in like mech or something like that, but like as it stands now, you really don't really bring more than 1 car of these in most decks, so there's no reason to bring them on top of them either. Conqueror's ATGM is fine. It's just a Conqueror's, which is good. But only really seen maybe if you're playing mech. But then you might also just play, if you're playing Baltic, you run the very cheap ATGM because the spike you will always run. It's a very good ATGM, it's very fast, it's very accurate. Not the same range as the Dorban LR, the long range variant, but it's still very good. And both of them also get like solid transports. Again, you wouldn't use the KT because it's kind of wasted on them with only 7 per card. But Musti or KK are very, very frequently used because you don't need them quite as much. So you always have them left over. And paying an additional 5 points for like a 16 AP regress rifle that can one-shot up to 2 armor is good. Or just a grenade launcher. Raniko's base, really same story with base Panzeri, right? No real reason, they're not inherently horrible, but no real reason to use them when you have Raniko 90s, which are solid. I think they're a bit overrated, but to be fair, I think I'm very much in the minority on that. They're solid, but they're still only 10 men. They have a good MG, solid primary, and the Apilas at 10 men. I find them a bit whelming, right? Nothing special. You see them very often, again, specifically in Moto, very much because you don't get shocks there outside of the Kartiniakari. So those are your only infantry type Apilas options. Which, in which case it's a very good reason to bring them. In unspec, I think I've started bringing them every now and then now as well, but in the past I was one of the very late adopters of them. I still think they're fine, right? But sometimes people hype them up, and honestly, I don't really see that. Again, I'm in the minority, but some people feel like they're or it sounds like sometimes people talk them up like they're the best special forces in the game, which they obviously aren't, but it's just me. I've been wrong before, so I might still very much be wrong about that opinion too. But that's because in Koreme, they're basically like Tankashasho, right? 1400 meters, 16 AP, 1 shots up to 2 armor. Very much see them in Moto. Such a ridiculous rifle is always good to have. Obviously, it's not an 18 AP like the Alpini 90 have or the Folgore. It's still very good though. And also, again, gets a lot of the good transport options. In mech as well, you see them very often in the BMP1 or BMP2. Always nice to have like Rico's rifle squads with like IFVs. That's a very good combination. I liked it very much. And it works here as well. Alright, we had the worst and best tab. Probably, honestly. Let's go to the support tab, which there's not a lot of stuff in there, but a lot of the stuff in here is still very good, relatively speaking, to the total number of units. Now, IDO's 80. No, don't lie to me. IDO's 79. There you go. It's like a Ponge 2, the North Korean missile systems, the exact same thing, even the exact same chassis. Maybe you've recently seen me play. I thinking it was support, no? Look, I'm still a believer, but when you have a choice, don't rely on them. They're probably still very good, specifically like price-wise for dealing with Nighthawks or like the A10 because of low ECM. And against like Nighthawk, when there's seed coming, you just can buy 2 or 3 of them, but they're so cheap. Still, very low accuracy, of course. Very, very good range, and of course HE for the price, but you're gonna miss a lot. So if you want a long-range missile system, you're probably better off using the either A96 or the Bookham 1. That still, though, somewhat requires a somewhat competent radar micro on your end. Now, if you're bad at radar micro and you want some long range, maybe the Auto 79 is the correct choice here. So, yeah. But, these systems used in other nations as well. If you're playing Baltic Front, you get a Neva, which is essentially the exact same thing. Although the Neva comes in wheeled or a tracked chassis, the Neva tracked has more armor than this thing, so, Auto 86, not really bad per se, actually. It's very cheap, comes with an Igla, 10 of them. Only has to reload after firing 2 of them. So, the 10 seconds only happens after every 2 missiles. It's actually not bad at all, it's actually quite good. No stabilizer, but for 25 points on wheels, what can you expect? Still, you don't really see it. Because you have specifically air decoys available, and they do so much for your air defense that honestly you could really get away with running a single card of air defense in your support tab. If you especially if you run 2 cards of air decoys on a ground transport, they help you so much, and 10 of them, or in Baltic 8, goes such a long way. Oh, do you get 10 in Baltic as well? I always forget if Baltic gets an availability bonus nowadays. Either way, air decoys do a lot of heavy lifting, so that's why some of the AH is not really necessary. You still run it because you have the activation points, but yeah. Ito 90, one of the best AA systems in the game. Not even a prototype. It is wheeled, it carries a lot of ammo, it has a very good salvo length on top of that, right? It's not like it has to reload after every missile. It is non-radar. It is very good against helicopters, and given the fact that it is non-radar, it's still good enough versus airplanes. It has 65% base accuracy. The only thing that would make this more busted is if it had a stabilizer, honestly. It is really good. It is incredibly good. Throughout the opener, throughout the late game, mid game, at any point, it's a good unit to have. It is just honestly a must take. Really, the only way to make the Crotal even better is to give it more ammo. That's essentially what this did. Also, like a tiny bit more anti-plane range and 5% more accuracy. Or is the Crotal 60? Either way, really good unit. I think the Crotal is 60% accuracy. This little thing here, very good base defense. But even besides that, it's very good. You can use it as impromptu fire support because with 5 armor, IFVs are gonna struggle. It stuns very fast. It's good at deterring helicopters. Good against helicopter spam, especially. There's a reason you see this in like Red Mech or even Baltic or Finland Mech or armored if you ever see that deck quite frequently. It's a good AA piece. And for 25 points you get full range versus helicopters for specs. And again, very, very good suppression. It's not like the strongest when it comes to killing, but it's certainly up there when it comes to stunning. Marksman. It's a solid spec. It's just there's never really a reason to use it, I'm afraid. You have your E290, which already does the anti-helicopter duty, but better. In mech or armor, sure, it's a good spec. Okay, it's a solid spec. Does it have more accuracy than the challenge? It also has more accuracy than the Commonwealth Marksman. The Commonwealth Marksman has a 50 and 35% accuracy / stabilizer, respectively. You have okay speed as well. If you compare this to the Chieftain Marksman, which is also 60 points, that thing has more armor, but only 45k mage. I guess it's only 5k mage difference, but the accuracy is much, much better. It's a good spec. Just unfortunately overshadowed. It's just a Gvostika, which is fine. This is basically a Mister. The gun, well, maybe not range, but accuracy, HE, rate of fire, And most importantly, aim time, 10 seconds it is the exact same as the Mista, or the copy that the East Germans have. Main difference is, of course, the chassis is different. You have less armor, you come with less ammo, and don't have all the other bells and whistles like the direct fire gun and what have you. Armor is, out of all of those things, armor is probably the biggest deal. Much, much easier to counter battery and kill than the Mista is. The other difference, though, is it comes 3 on trained and 2 on hardened. And it comes in mech. I think this is the only howitzer with 10 seconds aim time that mech gets, if I'm not mistaken. Big deal. That said, it's a prototype, so only Baltic and Finland mech gets this, so they're not like top of the line decks either way. They're good, don't get me wrong, but they're not like S tier or anything. But it is worth pointing out for those decks. And they're nice decks, they're fun decks. Cluster MLRS. This does, I believe, not have. Yeah, 30 seconds aim time, long reload time. Basically a Grad, right? But with cluster, and same problems as the Grad with long reload time, long aim time, so. Napalm! It's fine. Again, maybe you've recently seen me use Napalm MLRS quite a bit. When I was playing Entente or Yugoslavia support. It's fun. Like, you have the Tilak 91, you have a Jurgen, right? Both of which are very, very good, so there's no real reason to use this, unfortunately. Sergei is just a Ural truck. Honestly, at this point, just use this thing here is better. Sergei mod, however, says the same for the 5, which is like a very high burst, followed by relatively long reload time. But with the very high accuracy and also increased range, this actually has killing power. It's fine. The problem is, if you use it as base defense, it only has 5 HP and no armor, right? Unlike some other specs that might be tracked and have 1 armor or 2 armor even and 10 HP, like a single autocannon vehicle will instantly pop you, so that is worth pointing out. Still, it's a solid AA piece, even like offensively pretty good. Like for 30 points, getting this much range on wheels is very strong. It's just very squishy. Like the above 30, for the same price, only gets to 450 range, right? So that is worth pointing out. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this used to be even stronger at release. I don't know if it was the accuracy or maybe also the range versus helicopters. I think it got a nerf at some point, like right after release of the DLC, if I'm not mistaken. Telak 84 is kind of a counterpart to the Israeli. Is it called Sholev? I don't remember. It's a bit of an odd one. It has 15 seconds aim time, which is very rare on howitzers. So it's not quite on par with like the 10 seconds very modern howitzers, but at the same time, it's not quite as slow as the 30-second ones. Actually has a solid reload time as well of like 5 seconds between shots, but only shoots 3 rounds before having to reload for 30 seconds, which is very poor when it comes to sustained fire, of course. But for some reason, it's also support only, not even armored. So the armor is quite nice, right? It's very hard to kill this with counter battery, but it takes quite a long time for this unit to get its to get like a lot of value out of it, right? Because the Telak 91, faster aim time, more accurate, and fires also 5 rounds in a burst, right? It's just all around better. The trade-off is just counter battery ability, as in like getting counter battery, right? But I guess it's also easier to counter battery with this thing, given that it has 10 seconds aim time. But you get the idea, right? So it's look, it's fine, but you have just 2 better options, right? The Jurgen and the Telak 91. 6 HE motor, one of 2 in the game. They can be quite strong. It is worth pointing out, though, that they have 10 seconds aim time, which for howitzers is good, for mortars is not so good, right? For each HE, if we exclude some exceptions like, VPM 120 or something, essentially for each HE, you get an additional 2 seconds aim time. This has 10 seconds, 5 HE has 8, 4 HE has 6, 3 HE has 4, 2. But I think it can't go lower than 4, though. Yeah. AML 60 also has 4 seconds aim time. Unless I skip the number? Yeah, no. 3HE, 2HE, both have 4 seconds aim time. So, yeah. Then again, it also is like 6HE, right? If it hits like a truck. Also costs an armor and like to resupply this thing, though, right? It's a 48 per shot, which is quite high. It can be fun to mess around with them, but practically you're better off using a 580 motor for your smoke and all that, right? It's just more cost effective for that. You pay less, you get more ammo, have a faster aim time, and use your proper artillery for offensive usage. But it's not bad by any means. And you have a 3 and a 580 motor, right? Pretty basic. Not a lot of stuff going on in the tank tab, but percentage wise, in that like might be the best tank tab in the game. Nothing in here is quite useless, like close to it. There's 2 units that are like but by no means like horrible. Jared here on the other hand is very good. Doesn't have an MG, but with 3 HE on a pretty long range gun with 8 RPM, good speed and autonomy, and 5 front armor for 15 points. Very good fire support, very good meat shield even, especially against autocannons and such that need multiple shots. Very good against 80 like cheap ATGM spam, because you can't get one shot until 19 AP heat. So all the meat and 1 users and such like me, they're gonna cry. And even tanks will need 23 AP at max range to one-shot you, right? Carl Gustavs can't one-shot you, which is like a very common anti-spam AT weapon, if you will, right? Very, very good unit. If A wishes it was this useful. Oh, don't get me wrong, it's not a horrible unit. It's like a decent gun. It gets a 50 cal, even better armor, but 10 points for this? Like, the AP doesn't really matter. The accuracy is the same. Okay, AP does matter, but it's not a huge deal, realistically speaking, honestly. Stabilizer is irrelevant, like, who cares about 15%? Accuracy is the same, range is the same, RPM is the same, HE is the same, although you have a slightly bigger radius and a bit more suppression. You got an MG, especially 50 cal, which is nice. You're slower, you have still bad optics, and you only get 2 armor, and that for 10 points is just not worth it. Again, the T55A isn't like the worst like fire support / spam tank out there, but when you have the chariot here, there's no reason to use it. Mati, you don't really see it, but it doesn't mean it's a bad unit. You don't see it because of the Recon variant in the Recon tab. But 50 points, 17 AP full range is really strong. Now it is difficult to actually like make this work if you wanna get a quad stack going and kill a super heavy up close because of its off-road speed and such, and because it's pretty squishy for the price. But it doesn't mean it's bad by any means. You just gotta be careful. And defensively, using it defensively, it's still very strong. If you park it somewhere where if tanks want to engage it, they have to get close, right around the corner or something, up a plateau or in a forest or something, you can get quite a lot of damage off with this thing for 50 points. I don't think there's any better gun at this price range. Also, sometimes the SMG, there you go. T72M1 next to the T55A, the only other like meh unit in this tab, right? It's just not very great. It doesn't punch up too well. It punches down decently, but at 70 points you'd expect a bit more. At max range, it can barely penetrate like the usual medium tanks you see in this price range. It has medium optics at least, and it's like a solid fire support tank if it comes down to it, but it's just not very great. Hey, for 50 points you get 7 AP and a bit speed, which is neat. Which doesn't sound crazy, but is... Oh, and 1 RPM actually, right? But like certain AP or like every additional AP at some point becomes very, very valuable. Then 23 AP is usually you have to pay at least... I want to say 165 Oh, no, 155. 155. The SRV 121 and the Ariete get that at 155. Still, usually you obviously have to pay a lot more. That said, of course, usually tanks with this much AP have a lot more armor too. But you have very good speed actually, so that helps a bit with having low armor. And it is difficult to make these work consistently. They can sometimes be very situational, like especially if you're playing against an ATGM heavy deck or like a mech deck. On the one hand, they might do very well against the medium tanks. On the other hand, when you go up against a lot of ATGMs, you really start noticing this low armor. Or Recon tanks that don't have as much AP, but you can't spot. So it doesn't really make up for the lack of, let's say, an M2 Wilk that you get in Baltic, but it's still a good tank, and it's just the fun value alone when you get like a 3 or 4 stack of these even going and just bully any tank into non-existence. it gets a lot of extra points for that. M1 mod, you can get 4 of them in Finland now. It's fine. It's like a Moderna, but instead of the autocannon, you get 9 RPM. And on actual accuracy, you're actually accurate. And the Moderna isn't. This thing is. Yeah, it's fine. It's like a slightly worse 2A5, but you get 3 per card, which is probably better. Like, you lose 1 armor and some stabilizer, but you have an autoloader, and you're 3 per card. Or 4 even. Also, in general, like, good side armor, top armor, even on top of that, right? Sure, quote unquote, only 21 front armor, but like 4 top armor, 10 side armor, it's pretty good. Then 70k mage, 9 RPM auto loaded. It's a good super heavy. And honestly, you could make a point or an argument for this being the best single super heavy card in the game, right? Because you do get 3 with 23 AP and 21 armor at 9 RPM auto loaded. And 70k mage, right? Just 1 additional armor and suddenly you're 2 per card. Again, if it's just unit on unit, obviously it's not the best, but when you talk about the value you get per card, hard to beat this when it comes to other super heavies, right? Moderna is also very good at 3 per card. But it's worth pointing out. Recon, I'll admit, it's just fine. I mean, I don't think I really need to go over these. When there's nothing special, BB1 TJJ is quite good. Like a stealth ATGM for 35 points. This is actually very good. It's quote-unquote only a conquers, and you have to reload after every missile, but you have stealth and optics, and that stealth helps a lot. And the Grom, while not amazing, sometimes helps finishing off stuff that gets too close and survives the conquers or something like that, right? And it gives you something to shoot at infantry. Sure, it's not going to be amazing, but it still means that infantry can't just walk up to you and kill you when you're sitting there, right? Quite neat. Good. And like very affordable. BMP1 KT is basically a Snezhka. Probably better autocannon compared to the 2A42 that the Snezhka gets. Worse armor, I'm pretty sure the Snezhka has 4, but it's solid. You still usually run a BMP1 TJJ, but it doesn't mean this is bad by any means. And unlike the TJJ, it's probably better as base defense because much better against infantry, much better against multiple cheap units, and also can shoot at helicopters if it comes down to it. Edeco is obviously amazing. Must have unit. Basically a Recon variant of LSCR or SAS. You get a manpad, you get an Apilas, you get an SMG. All very good. All like close to S tier. One of the best manpads, one of the best AT weapons, and one of the best primary weapons you can get. Like at least generic primary weapons. Obviously, the G11 would be absolutely amazing, right? No, everybody would love to have the G11 in this game. But SMGs are very, very good on elite squads. Yeah. And they very, very much bolster your air defense. You get them on wheels, you have your wheel AA. You have your AA that deals extra chip damage when your E286 deals 9 damage to a plane. You have your frontline anti-air, like right at the front, to shoot on helicopters that might get too close otherwise, right? Helps a lot. Also with the very good optics means very good against tigers because I can spot them. It's just very, very strong. Also bolster your anti-tank weaponry and like anti-tank infantry, and unlike LSCR, you still have very good anti-tank weapons otherwise, so you don't fully rely on them with that regard. Okay, this thing exists. Monkey is honestly, if only this had more autonomy. This is the only gripe I have with this unit. It's the only vehicle that has very good stealth. Right? Keep that in mind. Every other Recon vehicle has medium stealth at best. This has the same stealth as Recon Infantry, right? Same stealth as Edecoys. The only thing that has better stealth is Recon's like 2-man sniper squads. This is so funny. But with the autonomy, it's just so hard to make this work because it will just like what you would want to do with this, right, is to sneak around the map, right? Like sniper squads, but much, much faster. A bit less stealthy, but still very stealthy. But with the autonomy, it's just the thing that holds it back. If this had like 500 or more autonomy, I think you might actually see this every now and then. I'm not saying it would be close to a must-have, but I think you would actually see this sometimes. And then it would actually be kind of worth it. It's just also just hard to justify to give this more autonomy, to be fair. But it would be so freaking funny. B76, Polish have a variant with a 50 cal that is just better. It's still not amazing, but it's fine. It's like 15 points, cheap fire support with a 50 cal. The 50 cal does add a lot in this case. KPSV, of course, very, very good. The Recon variant of the Mati. Low RPM and low speed don't matter as much, or the stabilizer when you're a Recon tank. You just shoot out of a bush and don't get spotted. And 17 AP at full range hits quite like a truck. Second strongest Recon tank. Well, together with the CTQ. The CTQ, I think, also is 17. CC. It's solid shock Recon squad. Not the best, but honestly, when it comes to Red 4 shock squads, these are probably the second best. Red 4 really has horrible shock squads when it comes to Recon. Raika, the main issue is just the anti-tank weapon range. You'd really want more because they will very often sit in like a bush that is run by open area. In which case, the difference between 700 and 525 is very noticeable. It's always good to have extra range, but on Recon squads, I think you feel it extra. And that is really the most important weapon you have on these Recon squads, on the shock squads at least. And line infantry squad, I suppose, as well. Yeah, at least you have decent AP and I guess accuracy, unlike a, Elrak, whatever the base just have. It's fine. You still get great transports for the KT, but you usually don't use the KT in this case. You don't get any of the other XAs except for the basic one, which is kind of odd, but probably for the better. At least one of the squads doesn't get the Carrier KK and Musti. You'd probably run this quite a lot with the Musti if you had. But the BTR 60 PP is still good. Wiggle tab. Vigilant is. You get outranged by tanks, no accuracy, and you're very, very slow. So, yeah. Unless you want to meme around, don't use this. High top carrier is okay, but you have only one armor and you have to reload after every missile. That is usually the killer for these kind of vehicles. It's not horrible, but 40 points for that is just odd. And you have a TOW 2 carrier, which, doesn't have this issue, but then you're looking at 60 points, which is also, again, like, yes, it hits like a truck, but you really have to babysit this because it can't take a hit at all, and then it's awkward again, right? Stormy used to be 5 points, I think, at release, with like even worse autonomy, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember, or maybe it was 15 points with better. I don't know. Something was with this thing. It would be really fun if it had like 5 points with 100 kilometers or something, just like really horrible fuel efficiency. It's sort of like turrets that you can use in your base. That would be really fun. It's not horrible actually for 10 points. It would need like 50 kilometers or like 10 extra kmh to be, I would say, decently usable. And by usable, I mean like usable in the sense that you can get to the enemy and shoot at them without having to buy a supply truck. It has horrible AP, only 2 HE, and a very basic MG with like 3 armor is neat, but it does make up for all that you lose. Also, I think this is swastika on top of the gun mantlet there. Yeah, Musti. Like, it is essentially a recoilless rifle Jeep, although it's not a Jeep, I suppose. A recoilless rifle truck with 10 HP and 16 AP. But then you gotta keep in mind, most other recoilless rifles, especially on like Blue for it, have at least 1575 meters range. In case of the Wombat, even 1925. And 3 HE. The 16 AP is very nice, and it one-shots 2 armor, but it still gets killed very quickly, and you have to attack move with it, right? So, usually the range is actually better than the AP in this case, because mainly you use those recoilless rifle jeeps as fire support against infantry. It actually makes this a bit awkward. It's not that great. It looks much better on paper, I think. And then the Jeep as a German Jeep, which is just, I mean, it's not the worst unit out there, but Helicopters, 2 out of 3. And by that I mean good helicopters. And pretty cheap TOW 2 helicopter. I think it doesn't get cheaper than that. There's a Fennec TOW 2 for 5 points more, you get 2 extra HP and a bit of speed. But I'm not sure if it gets cheaper than that when we want a TOW 2. At least in the helicopter tab. It's fine. Good. Very small as well. Decently fast. That's like a little bird, isn't it? Yeah, it's good. And in Finland, definitely worth using. Even in Baltic front, honestly. Like, you pay 10 points, because I love the Gazelle Hut one, and for 10 points more, you get 3 extra, actually I had to think there for a second, 3 extra AP and good chunk accuracy, right? It's very good. It's actually a very good unit, in fact. The KT is, of course, very strong as well. And autocannon, it just deletes very quickly, lots of rocket pods. Worth noting, of course, that the autocannons are fixed on the helicopter, so they're not on a turret, so the entire helicopter has to rotate to shoot at something. But when it shoots, whatever you shoot at is dead. Like, the autocannons just melt. MIT is just bad. Like, for 10 points more, you get not just better rocket pods, right? Even if this didn't have the gun, it would be a much better unit than the MIT. And of course, you get the guns on top of that, right? It is worth noting that they don't have armor, unlike M8 MTVs, for example, that they get one armor. So small arms will deal full damage to them, and even helicopters with small arms will deal acceptable damage, right? So 3 Gazelle, 3 Harras with the double Brownings will kill you. Avia, it's a decent supercar bomber. Its main survivability comes from its HP, and the bomb hits quite well. Not quite P5 level, of course, but it's quite strong. Yeah. Opponent will see it coming from a mile away and have lots of time to react, but it's still fine at supercard. C-170 is obviously horrible. I don't think this needs explaining, right? It's very slow, it has no survivability. The missiles are useless, and you even only get 5. I think if this was like 40 points and like 5 on the lead, it might actually see usage, right? Because if you have the expansion points, you might use this as like an emergency. Oh, there's something in my spawn that needs killing or something like that. That could be like a usage, but other than that, it's just horrible. Hawk 51, it's good. Obviously not as crazy as it used to be when it was 60 points and all that, but it's still fine, right? A J7C, which is also a good plane. It's fast, it has even some ECM, and can double as like a helo hunter. Not the best helo hunter, but you know, it's a good plane, it's a good bomber. You're gonna struggle in team games when you want to use this, especially near the front line, because you know air defense is gonna be a lot denser. But you know, it's a good cheap bomber. It's ASF. I'm just lost for words because I just never used this, right? There's a lot of I use a lot of units, but there's a few units that I just almost never used. It's okay, I suppose. It's like a secondary ASF card. You get 2 sets of missiles, a good short range missile. It's like quite literally an AIM-9L, I suppose, stat wise at least. And like mediocre medium range missile. It has decent range, to be fair. You get a gun, which is important when you have 5 and 4 on the 2 missiles. No ECM though, but you're pretty cheap, and a 4 veteran is good. At least in Finland. I don't know if you get 4 in Baltic. Again, as a secondary ASF, I suppose in Baltic may be worth using, but you have 2 good other cards, so. This would be a decent plane if it dropped all its bombs in one run. I think it does not, if I'm not mistaken. By the way, I was pushing to get this fixed, but yeah, Southern 4. There was always like a bit of inside baseball here. I was, of course, in case you didn't know, part of the players who had impact on the patch notes that came with the Italy DLC. Or the balance changes and all that. We didn't have freehand, it also has to be said, right? We couldn't just prototype whatever we wanted, for example, and you know, there were limits to what we could do, or allowed to do, if you will. But it was also like a point of can't just give Fusion, or we couldn't just give Fusion like a 200 changelog page and all of it gets implemented. So there was always the argument or the position of we only have so many changes that we can get through. So do we want to use something that actually has a somewhat of an impact, or something that is essentially just, hey, a unit that never gets used is fixed, but it still never gets used, right? Yeah, just in case you were wondering. Yeah, J35FS. It's actually an okay rocket pod plane. It will pretty much kill any infantry in the open. It's probably not gonna kill them reliably in like buildings and such. It's not a lot of rockets you get, and if you have, usually it's better to have many low HE than fewer high HE, because it usually makes them more consistent. It's gonna strike against honestly even 2 armor onwards, I presume. To be fair, I haven't used it a lot, but there's like other rocket helicopters, planes with like 76 2HE rockets or something, and they will just one-shot anything up to like 5 armor even. This thing will probably struggle at 2HE onwards. And accuracy does matter, actually, especially against vehicles. Because when you right-click something, you still get the accuracy roll, whether it hits directly or, you know, around it when it quote-unquote misses. Can you also multi-roll, but 25% is not a lot. This, for example, is an example, right? You get 3 times the missiles, but to be fair, 1 less HE, so you get 48 versus 108 HE. Still more than twice as much, right? Bit faster as well. I'd probably use the MiG-21 if you want the rocket but plane. So you get 4 versus 5, I suppose, but MiG-21 Bis is kind of like a Lazur. Actually, how does it compare to a Lazur? I rarely use this. I've seen this quite a bit, but I rarely use this. So the Lazur has, I'm pretty sure, less ECM. It has 10% ECM. It also has the R60s, which are actually very good for heat hunters because they have a reload time of 1 second as opposed to 2. So you very often get 2 of those off in one run. So usually it's better to have an R60 versus like an R60M, which has like 10% more accuracy and 4 HE, but reloads 2 seconds. So I much prefer the R60 base. And has the R13Ms which have 40% accuracy with 4 HE. These have 30%. That said, of course, you get 20% extra accuracy. ECM, and the gun is the same. Yeah, gun is the same. Veterancy level wise, the Lazur comes 3 on veteran. You get 2 on elite or 3 on hardened. In Finland, you get 4. For helo hunting specifically, I'd still say the Lazur is better. But the 30% ECM, of course, similarly to the L17K that Yugoslavia has, means a lot more survivable, and it means sometimes you can get into close range with enemy planes, in which case you're quite deadly. It's a solid plane for sure. And then you have the MiG-29, the MiG that with South Africa, I believe, finally got its nerf. Doesn't like ripple fighties anymore. And also doesn't come on elite anymore. It's still solid. It's just a lot less consistent, but it's still quite cheap for what you get for veteran R77s. Oh, does it still? No, does it still? I actually forgot. Does it still ripple fire? Yeah, it does actually. It still does actually. It's just a lot less accurate. Well, a good bit less accurate and more expensive. It's still good though. And then the F-18C is just one of your. How many are there actually? F-18, 27 PU, 15 Eagle, Eurofighter, Rafale are what I'd consider like the 5 top tier ASFs. Not the Barak. The Israeli don't count for me. The Israelis have the Barak too, which have 50%, but it's super card. And then the Bas Meshuba, which is 1 per card on elite, but 40% ECM. They don't count for me. So this is one of the 5. Most of these planes have like 4 and 4 on the missiles. The PU has 4 and 6. I think 4 short range and 6 medium range. Typhoon, Rafale, and Seagull have 4 and 4. I think the Rafale also has 4 and 4. Right? Does the Rafale have 4 and 6? The Rafale has 6 and 4 actually. Interesting. And you have 2 and 6. I mean, 2 means you're a bit limited if you need to like kill a helicopter or 2 because you only have 2 of them. You shouldn't really use them for that as much because you don't want to like be caught out looking with your ass towards enemy air spawn or something. So you always want to be careful if you want to use these for helo hunting. It's like you get an elite, you get plane of missiles, you get 50% ECM. Yeah, it's good, of course. It's just, in my opinion, not the ideal loadout. I think 4 and 4 would be better. Or 4 and 6, of course, but assuming you get 8 in total, I think if you're talking about fantasy loadouts, which might not be realistic, but 3 and 5 is probably what I think, if you're talking about 8 missiles total, is the best. But whatever. It's for niche scenarios. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that was Finland. Not a ton of units, of course. It's not like a major nation, but except for the logistics tabs, it's like all of the tabs are filled with goodies. Maybe not the vehicle tab if we exclude transports, but yeah. Let me know what you think, and yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Bye bye.